Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of In the Pit with Lobo Tiggre. Our victim of the day is Denis Laviolette. He's the CEO and president of Goldspot. Now this is a little bit unusual for us. He's not out there kicking rocks and drilling for gold himself at the moment. He is applying AI to the mining business, and he wants to put me out of a job. So I thought we'd ask him to tell us about what he's doing and why, and what's in it for us.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, first of all, for having me on the show. Goldspot Discoveries is really focused on bringing machine learning and artificial intelligence into the space to help everyone. That's essentially what we want to do. We're focused on two aspects of the space: the capital market side and the discovery side with exploration. And so far, we've been working with a lot of major companies to help leverage their data and transform that data into something useful. And use machine learning to find patterns in it that the human couldn't possibly find, and make predictions on where mineralization should be. In terms of the capital market side, what we're looking to do is analyze all of the junior equities and see which companies are most poised for discovery, have the right blend of dollars spent, cap structure, management team, past results, and how those stack up with the rest of the market, and really see if we can isolate outliers, people that maybe have a hard time getting access to capital because they don't have the right notoriety as a team that we know drives certain stories in this market. And really look from a results perspective and see, okay, if we can find some of those diamonds in the rough and bring dollars to them and bring our team to help make them better, then hopefully together we can make some discoveries. In exchange, we're looking to build a royalty portfolio with that work, an investment basket in junior equity, as well as continuing the services for major companies, help them make discoveries and keep our bills paid.
Okay, so there's a lot there to sort of unbundle in what you said. So
sure.
Let's think about it. But just to be clear, on the AI, on the machine learning, you're applying that to all sorts of data, geophysics, geochem, all the data sets that the companies have on the properties, and trying to see if you can get the machines to spot the next deposit. Is that right? And
correct.
Does that work? How well does that work? What can you tell us about how that's going?
Yeah, no, it works well. From a couple of perspectives. One, it can help to avoid drilling a miss hole. You can learn as much from past successes as you can learn from past failures. And so it's interesting, we come at the problem both ways. Traditionally in this space, we spend a huge amount of money collecting data, like huge, and we're not using it. And so naturally you'd think that if you are using all of the data, then you'll have some positive result, as a result of actually using it and not just letting it sit there. In terms of success rates, which I think answers your question a little more directly, and our track record, with a lot of the major companies, they've become return clients now, and they've taken equity stake in us, as a result of past work that we've done for them. So I think that alone is a testament to our success. The challenge with doing a lot of work for bigger clients is that they're not so motivated to press release one positive drill hole in a gold spot target, or even 2 or 5 or 10. What they really want to do is develop what's material to them, and that's really the challenge for us. As a proof of concept, going to the majors first for endorsement, it came as a trade-off. You get the fact that you've got the thought leadership in the space that is the major companies or the mid-tier companies endorsing your technology and using you time and again, but at the trade-off of not having that instant gratification of a press release for a drill result. So I can say that we have been successful. Hopefully soon we'll see some news coming out with some of our clients that are, where some of this stuff is taking shape.
So the first pass application was with the bigger companies using their data and helping them target. And since it's their project, their data, they get to decide when they press release.
Correct.
Right. But you've already done this. You've helped them target drill holes, and they've done the drilling, and they have the results. So you're waiting on them to be able to say what you've been able to do to the public. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I get that. I understand. We're waiting on pins and needles then. But can you talk to us about sort of the idea of it? I mean, there's the famous joke, geologists like to say that if you talk to a geophysicist and you give them the data, the geophysicist says, well, where do you want the deposit to be, right? Because there's so many, so
what
much
are you looking for?
Right, yeah, so much interpretation. Is it the bullseye? Is it on the margins? Is it this? Is it that? All these colorful things that look like maps but aren't really. there are a lot of geologists like, I've had enough of geophysics. It's all fairy tales. But you want to give that to machines and get better results. How does that work? Why?
Yeah. So typically in this space, when we analyze geophysical data, there's a whole bunch of off-the-shelf standard inversions. Let's just say we hire. I'm going to pick on a couple of companies. Let's say and they're big, so it's fine. Let's say you hire Geotech, right? A very, very tremendous geophysics firm. They'll come in, we'll pay $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 for geophysical survey, another $150,000 for post processing and all that sort of stuff. And I'm just throwing numbers out there, but just kind of in the range of what I've seen in the past. And so that company will then take that data, and they internally have developed all types of different algorithms and tools. And across the industry, these have been somewhat standardized. And so what you end up getting is, a first-second vertical derivative map, a total magnetic index, maybe a horizontal derivative. These are inversions. And so if you remember back in calculus, when you have like a quadratic, right, and you invert that, and you get sort of a lineament, or if you have like a curve that kind of goes up and down, and instead you end up getting this parabola at the inflection point type thing. And so these are these inversion maps, and so they'll take this super sophisticated multivariate data and they'll reduce it into a two-dimensional colorful product for us to use. And so those products have value to us, right, as geologists, and we can work with them and overlay them, but we're limited to that. We're limited to a color map, and we don't really fully, as an industry, a lot of geos working with this data didn't really fully understand what it was. They just know that, okay, I've got 4 or 5 maps. Let's see if anything is lining up with what I know.
Right.
And if it doesn't, then they throw the baby out with the bathwater. Mm-hmm. And with machine learning, what you can do is you can say, okay, here's a certain rock type, and ask the computer to figure out what petrophysical properties in the raw geophysical data lead to that, or best define that particular rock type. Mm-hmm. And then you would query the machine to say, okay, where else are we seeing these same petrophysical properties re-emerging in the data set? And then, so very simply now, we can use a data set that was traditionally used just to generate color maps and see trends and patterns, maybe structure, and we're looking and using it in totally different ways to extrapolate just as important information, but maybe differently than what we would have expected. Okay. So it's not necessarily like the geophysics goes in and the machine learning finds a target. It might be a particular rock type, one or another.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, but it's also sort of known that, like, there's another joke in geology that we say, IP geophysics stands for it's pyrite, because the geophysics can't tell which metal is returning these things. So you can see sometimes rock type lithologies you mentioned, but you can't tell what metals they contain necessarily. Is there something about the machine learning approach that changes that can tell us, what might be in here, or where is the best place to look in this rock package for the metals we want?
Definitely. So it looks beyond, just categorizing or grouping or looking for features in a very simplistic fashion. So when you're looking for something very minuscule differences in one petrophysical property to another, the machine learning has no limit to how many iterative processes you can go through. So it can basically do this 1,000,000 times. And if you have something that's very subtle and hard to pick up, it's far better at generating a very specific product after doing millions of iterations, whereas a standard geophysicist, maybe with their tools and their software, they could, they're limited to the number of iterations and trial and error that they can do. A computer can do it 1,000,000 times.
Understood.
Millions, billions of times if it wants. And today with cloud computing and a lot of the software. And so, you can isolate things that are so subtle. Because we're collecting, this data is 3-dimensional multivariate data. There's variables that are collected in the data that we don't use in our standard products that we get. And so when it's analyzing everything so thoroughly, it can find subtleties and find things that the human couldn't possibly do.
So the potential game changer here, from what I'm getting, is that there are limits to how much data the people can process, even with machine tools, mm-hmm. and that goes away with a machine, which can then maybe learn something or see something that the humans couldn't. Is that fair?
Right. Yeah, and to further elaborate on that, The human brain can think in 4 dimensions. We can essentially look at, the best 1% of us can look at 4 maps or 4 curves or 4 graphs or whatever have you simultaneously and look for correlations and patterns. I mean, if you can imagine if you're analyzing stocks or something like this,
right.
we generate a lot of things to make that easier so that we can take 2 layers and engineer a new variable and create a 50-day moving average that we can lay over on this. But eventually we're starting to get into this whole derivative thing. But by and large, if you were just to look at 4 raw data sets and look for patterns in 4, that's our limit as a human being. We can't look at anything more than that. We can't find patterns or correlations in anything more than that. A computer doesn't have that limit. It can look at millions simultaneously. So imagine millions of maps, whether it would be radiometrics, geophysics, geochemistry, with all those different elements, everything, and it's looking at all of this simultaneously to find a recipe or a pattern that, for us, it could take us 1 million years to come up with that.
So that'll be interesting. And we're waiting on the results of the first efforts at this that you've
Sure.
done with the majors. But your plan is not just to be a consultant to mining companies with this technology. The plan is to use it, helping juniors, you said the capital side, and let's be clear on that. You would use your tools to help them find the targets. But you would also use your tools to help you decide which juniors to work with. If you see one that you think has a great target they haven't realized yet, that's the one you invest in. Is that how that works?
Yeah, so that platform is really, we call it Resource Continental. And what Resource Continental is basically every shred of data available in the public domain on every exploration, junior company, big company, you name it, we've got everything. So every drill hole that's ever been press released, every financing event, management, insiders, macro market information, macro market trends, you name it, we've got it all in this system. And so it's taken us over 2.5 years, over $1 million of R&D just to clean that data and input that data and match it all up.
Because it's not uniform from the different sources, right?
Correct. And projects change hands, companies change their tickers, their mandates.
Right.
Like, it's just unbelievable. And I mean, we're dealing with tens of thousands of different companies.
So let me just be clear on something. Are you using the machine learning just on the geology, or are you using it on the companies too? Like, do you have a super spreadsheet, an AI spreadsheet that picks the companies on the company basis?
Right.
Too? You do?
Yeah. So it's looking at the capital markets data coupled up with that fundamental geology data. And so if you're in, let's just say you're in a particular, you're in the Deseado Massif, right, in Argentina, and we're looking at all of the deposits in the Deseado Massif, what ended up becoming mines, what ended up not becoming mines, what critical rock types were involved there, what grade over X number of meters matters in that district, how does that stack up in this market climate versus the market climate when those discoveries were made, what about the tax regime, did that change? And so we're looking at all of these different metrics. As you can imagine, it's just an endless sea of possibilities. But when you provide the computer with all of these, basically, if you can imagine columns of data, and then it figures out, okay, it's playing the market over and over and over again, and it's getting smarter. And so it looks at all those different variables, and it decides which ones are important and which ones aren't, and which ones can give it an edge in the investment world. And so it's kind of a quant trading platform, if you want to think of it that way. But we're using it as a quant opportunity picker platform for us.
Some of these things are so hard, and I think about the rocks, and I think about how hard it is to get data that means something, and data that it's so subject to interpretation and so subject to error, and to just give it to a machine and hope it's millions of iterations figures something new, it just kind of blows my mind. But if it works, it works, and we'll see soon enough. But then to take that over to the company side, where you deal with people who, it seems to me, are infinitely more complicated than a geological deposit. Is your AI smart enough to distinguish a promoter from an achiever?
Yeah.
A pure promoter. Promotion is a good thing. We need our stories promoted, but a guy who can walk the talk, or gal, your machine can see that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you how.
See, this is why I said he's trying to put me out of a job. Okay,
I'll give you a clue, or I'll give everybody an ingredient that they can look at. And it is hard to model, but we've been able to do it. But basically, if you can track every person in the space, every director, every management member, and all of the different insiders, and you track all of these people as people, and you attribute, let's say, financing. So we track all the financings, when a financing was announced, one of financing was closed, what was the delta on that? How much time between the financing being announced and the financing being closed? That's an important metric too, but maybe not as important as the actual financing and the amount itself on the closing. And so with each management member, if you were to attribute a financing event with that person, right? And so you have 5 directors, let's say, myself, yourself, and 3 other people. And each person, the company raised $5 million. Well, we each now have a 5 factor. Now you're on the board of 3 other companies, and you've raised an aggregate of, let's just say, $60 million in the last 18 months. So you're relevant.
Easy. Do it on a weekend.
Right, so it's access to capital, but we know in the geology world, access to capital matters.
Yes, it does.
If you can have the best project in the world, but if you can't raise money for it, then it's not going to get advanced and discoveries aren't going to be made. And so if we can start to track and attribute people with financing events and capital raises, then you can generate or engineer a new variable, which we call access to capital. And then it's a ranking. And then, like as you said, some people evolve. Like, or I guess what you were sort of suggesting to is that someone who is relevant maybe 10 years ago may not be relevant today. So even though they were a hot person, a hot promoter back then, maybe they blew up a couple of deals, and nobody wants to. You're only as good as your last deal. Nobody wants to flock in behind those people, and their access to capital, even though they may have a huge access to capital, if you were to look at it that way, the gamma or their relevance in the current market is nothing. So they haven't done anything. What have you done for me recently? Type thing, right?
Right.
So if you look at that, that's a really interesting factor, and you can add into how you analyze a company. And that's, looking at all different commodities, all different, the whole space that way. And so imagine you're doing that, but with drilling and everything else, it just becomes super sophisticated.
Okay, so back to you in Goldspot. You're doing your consulting for the big guys, and there's some revenue there, but you're also doing the capital side where you're deploying capital, and you're using your machine tools to both pick companies and teams, and as well as their properties, and look at which properties you think you can help and add value. And then you invest in them in exchange for a royalty. Is that how that works?
Yeah, pretty much.
So you pick a team and you help them. You say, hey, we'll invest in you, we'll give you this money, these are the targets we want you to drill. Is that more or less the way that deal works?
Yeah, pretty much. Or, these are where the targets we want you to drill, or this is the type of data collection you should be doing, and here's where you should be doing it to have the best possible result, like to get that next layer that's going to help us the most. And here's how we can help. And so right now we've got a team of 24 people, 9 PhDs. And really to do this, it's not a software solution. And so we're seeing a lot of this coming up, right? Where like other companies are toting that they're machine learning and mining and whatever have you. And they're almost selling it as a software solution. Like, give me your data, I'll plug it in and then give you a result. It's not like that. We have, everything is so different. And our team is, like, we have 4 geophysicists on our staff that have machine learning and data science capabilities as well. Like they have a good blend in both those skill sets in those domains. Same with structural geology. We have 4 PhD structural geologists. We have geochemists. We have everything. So when we take in a data set, we give that company targets, but we also reprocess, remodel. We bring in all of the district. We give them a lot more color on what they're after and where they are in the world and where they are in that district and what their potentials are, all these types of things. And so really transforming just the way that they look at their own project too, and the data that they have to work with. And so not only do they benefit from getting targets, but they also benefit from getting new models, new 3D models, new geophysical interpretations, and all these types of things, right?
So how many of these investments have you made so far?
Right now, 3. Probably look to make a few more this year, and it just depends on scale of size of investment versus royalty and commodity and what we're looking to
And since these are smaller deals and you're more material you're investing, then you can control the news flow from these. So when might we expect some first news from some results of your application of your...
hopefully soon. So the whole fact of us going public here and like the whole launch of our RTO and all that, it sort of blacked us out from doing any business from September until
I understand.
now. So we just deployed capital into 3 deals, and so we're hoping that so it'll take us a couple of months probably before we'll start seeing some news coming out of that. of those deals.
So the ticker SPOT. I do not own shares at this time. He's trying to convince me to buy shares, or maybe take my job. Maybe both. Maybe I'll just hang up my hat and buy shares at spot. But I want to see you do better than me first. So
sure,
for some friendly competition here. All right. So you've just started out. You've just gone public, and you have 3 pokers in the fire now that you control or have control over the news flow over. How much capital does that leave you left with?
We still have, even with those 3 investments, I'm just going to think right now off the top of my head, those 3 investments, we still got a good solid eight and change million to deploy. And
for a typical first pass drill result, that could allow you potentially to invest in how many more?
Well, we're going to be conservative with it, and we also have to be cognizant of our bandwidth. And so we're servicing major clients still. That uses a lot of our people's time. I only have so much of their excess time to deploy into the junior space, and so part of our business and ratcheting it up is being able to staff up to be able to deploy, say, all of that money. But
sorry, does that work cover most of your operating costs, or?
Yeah, all of it.
All of it.
Yeah. Pretty much all of our.
Do you expect to ever go back to the market again for a raise, or just keep going and growing organically?
I mean, look, if we can prove that this model works with this amount of money, we can ratchet 10 million into X number, then certainly we're going to go after a larger sum of money.
But it wouldn't be to keep the lights on. It would be okay.
It'd be like, this works. And
this works.
This
and think of what we could do with 100 million.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Okay. All right. So we have plenty of money. We've got 3 pokers in the fire that should have news real soon now.
Yep.
And we have, how long ago did you do the first consulting gigs for the majors?
3 years ago. Started about 2 years ago. Yeah.
So material news, it sounds like 2019 should be a very pivotal year for you.
Some of those companies have put, I can say honestly, some of those companies have put over 15,000 meters into some of our targets. So,
okay. Well, we don't want to get you in trouble. We'll leave that there. So it really is going to come down to the results, I guess.
Yeah.
And I will be very interesting to see if your machine is smarter than I am, because I know I'm pretty smart. So it'll be fun to see how I stack up against your machine.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We'll see how. Maybe this is something that you guys can use in the future, and everybody investing in the space will use.
Well, if what you're doing works, my job for my customers and myself is to make money, and if you make more money than I make, then the answer is obvious. So we'll see. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Yeah. Thanks for having us.